Have you been stuck in a cycle of fear? A fear that stops you from moving? A fear that keeps you from doing what you plan? A fear that keeps you from living an extraordinary life, keeping you from leaving everything that does not matter behind and going after everything you have always dreamed of. Have you ever noticed that there are people who seem to have no fear, who make difficult decisions without shaking, while many freeze in doubt? These people simply act. And everyone says, I wish I were as brave as that guy. But what few people know is that this type of person does not have any special abilities or special genetics. These people have learned to deal with fear and not let it stop them, and know that you can overcome all your fears too. In old Japan, there was a group of warriors who turned fear into their greatest weapon. They did not deny their fear. They did not pretend to be brave. They understood something that modern science only discovered many years later. Fear is not your enemy. It is fuel that is pointed in the wrong direction. The system they created is called Bujinkan, and when you understand how it works, you realize you have spent your entire life fighting the wrong thing. But there is a problem. This system will require you to face uncomfortable truths, and most people would rather live in fear than face these discomforts. Before I show you the system that can destroy your fears, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like below and comment, what is the fear that stops you the most in your life? This helps the channel reach more people, and I can also bring you increasingly better content. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to the video. Chapter 1. The meeting. The story I am going to tell you today involved a lawyer named James. He was a successful guy with an apartment in an upscale neighborhood and a solid career, but he had a secret no one knew. He lived in fear that stopped him from moving. Fear of public speaking, fear of confrontation, fear of disappointing people, fear of failure, fear of being exposed as a fraud. Every day, he woke up with a tightness in his chest that would not go away. A very curious case, you must think. How can a successful lawyer be afraid of confrontation? Strange, do you not agree? But James was this guy who was very afraid of making mistakes, and this fear drove him. But at the same time, it was eating him up inside. He made up for it with hard work. The more fear he felt, the more hours he worked, the more insecure he became, the more results he sought. His colleagues thought he was ambitious. The truth, he was running away, until the day the thing that had to happen did. A meeting with an important client. The room was full. All eyes were on him. And in the middle of the presentation, his voice broke. His hands began to shake. Cold sweat ran down his back. Total panic. He left the room, locked himself in the bathroom, and had his first real panic attack. There, sitting on the cold floor of a corporate bathroom, he understood either he destroyed his fear or his fear would destroy him. That is when a friend mentioned a Bujinkan dojo that had just opened in the city. It is not just fighting, the friend said. It is about facing what stops you from moving. James did not believe in martial arts. He thought it was just something you see in movies, but he was so desperate that he agreed to take a trial class. And it was in that first class that he heard something that changed everything. Chapter 2, the first lesson, the dojos. Sensei was a short, silent man in his 60s. He looked at James and asked, "Why are you here?" James began to give his rehearsed answer. "I want to learn self-defense, improve my physical fitness." The sensei raised his hand. "That is a lie. You are here because you are afraid, and you want me to take that fear away from you." James felt his blood run cold. How did this guy know? I cannot take away. Your fear, the sensei continued. And if I could, you'd be even weaker. Fear is not a flaw. It is information. You just have not learned to read it. And then he explained something that overturned all of James's beliefs about courage. In the Bujinkan, there is a principle called Kyojitsu Tenkan-ho, the art of transforming truth into illusion and illusion into truth. Ninjas understood that reality is not fixed. It changes based on where you place your attention. Your fear is telling you something true. There is danger, but your interpretation is an illusion. You think the danger is real when in fact it is only a possibility. Fear of public speaking is not fear of speaking, the sensei said. It is fear of judgment, but judgment cannot hurt you. Physically, your body is reacting to an imaginary threat as if it were real. James had never thought of it that way. In old Japan, the sensei continued, a ninja faced real dangers every day. Real swords, deadly falls, but he did not freeze. Do you know why? Because he trained his body to tell the difference between real danger and imaginary discomfort. And that is when the real training began. Chapter 3. Feudal, the unshakable mind. The first thing the sensei taught was not punching or kicking. It was breathing. When you feel fear, he explained, the first thing that changes is your breathing. It becomes rapid, shallow, and from the chest. This activates your sympathetic nervous system survival mode. Everything in your body screams, run or fight. But if you control your breathing, you trick your body. You tell it there is no real danger here. It seemed too simple, but James tried. Inhale for a count of 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 6. Hold, empty for 2. The first few times it did not work. His mind raced with anxious thoughts faster than he could breathe. Normal. His brain had been programmed for that pattern for years. But the sensei did not give up. You will repeat this 1,000 times, 2,000, 10,000, until when fear strikes, your body responds automatically with controlled breathing instead of panic. That is it. Feudal, the unshakable mind. It does not mean not feeling fear. It means that fear does not dictate your actions. A Zen monk once said, the tree that does not bend in the storm breaks. The tree that bends survives. Feudal is not rigidity. It is conscious flexibility. James practiced every day, before bed, every day when he woke up, in meetings, in traffic, in the elevator, control breathing. For the first few days, it seemed pointless. By the second week, something started to change. During a tense conversation with his boss, he felt the tightness in his chest begin. But instead of freezing, he breathed. 4 seconds in, for held. 6. Out. The tightness eased. His voice came out firm. It was not magic. It was reprogramming. Chapter 4. Facing the shadow. But breathing was just the beginning. In the third week, the sensei introduced something much more difficult. Controlled exposure to discomfort. You spend your life avoiding what scares you, he said. Every time you avoid it, your brain learns this thing is dangerous. I need to run away. Avoidance feeds fear. In the Bujinkan, we do the opposite. We walk straight into discomfort slowly with control until the body understands, I survived. It was not the end of the world. The exercise was simple but brutal. Stand still while someone acted out attacks around you. Punches that stopped inches from your face. Kicks that grazed you. Your instinct screamed to run. But the rule was do not move, just breathe. The first time, James lasted 15 seconds. before his body shook uncontrollably. The sensei stopped. Good. You felt the fear and did not die. Tomorrow, 20 seconds. It seemed crazy, but there was science behind it. A Stanford University neuroscientist who has been studying fear responses for 18 years has discovered something revolutionary. When you repeatedly expose yourself to a stimulus that causes fear, but no actual harm is done, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, begins to recalibrate. It learns that the stimulus is not deadly. The fear response diminishes. This is exactly what ninjas did for centuries. Without any knowledge of neuroscience, they trained and controlled danger situations until their bodies stopped reacting with panic. James continued. With each class more exposure, with each week less shaking. By the end of the second month, he could hold completely still while 3 people acted out simultaneous attacks. His heart raced, yes, but his mind remained clear. And then the transfer happened. Important meeting at work, difficult. Client, tense atmosphere. James felt the beginning of the old tightness in his chest. But instead of spiraling, something new happened. He breathed. 4 in, for holding, 6 out. And he thought, this is just discomfort. It is not real danger. I have survived worse in the dojo. His voice was firm. His hands did not shake. He presented clearly. In the end, the client closed the deal. His colleagues thought he had taken some medication. The truth, he had reprogrammed his brain. But here, the real test began. Because fear is not just about external situations. The worst fear is within. Chapter 5, The Ninja Inner. You have 2 enemies, the sensei said in A class. The external enemy and the internal enemy. The external one you can see, predict, and train against. The internal one is more dangerous because it knows all your weaknesses. In the Bujinkan, there is a concept called Shinjiai mind, technique, and body as one. But before unifying, you need to confront the fragmented parts. James thought he was making good progress. Control breathing, check. Exposure to discomfort, check. But one night, the sensei asked a question that shattered everything. What is the one fear you never admit out loud? Silence. James felt something churn in his stomach. The fear you hide even from yourself. The sensei continued. That is what truly controls you. James knew exactly what it was, but he had never voiced it. The fear of being inadequate, of not being enough, that if people really knew him, they would leave. Speak, the sensei ordered. I am afraid. I am not good enough. The words came out in a choked voice. That everything I have achieved is luck, that at any moment they will find out I am a fraud. Saying it out loud was like opening an old wound. But something strange happened. It did not hurt anymore. It was as if naming the fear took away its power. Good, the sensei said. Now you can fight it. While it was hiding, it was invincible. Now it is just another opponent. Chapter 6, The Mirror Technique. The next exercise was the hardest of all. The sensei asked James to write down all the stories he told himself based on fear. I am not good enough. People will judge me. If I fail, I will lose everything. I do not deserve success. Each limiting belief on paper. And then the instruction. Now question. Each one. Where is the actual evidence? Not the feeling, the evidence. James looked at the first one. I am not good enough. Evidence in favor. None. Concrete. He had a degree. Successful. Cases satisfy clients. Evidence. Against plenty. Wait, he thought. This story I believe for years does not have any basis in fact. Exactly. The sensei said, in the Bujinkan we call this kyojitsu, truth and falsehood. You live within a falsehood because you never stop to investigate. The ninja questions everything, including his own beliefs. James spent the week deconstructing every fear, and he discovered something shocking. 90% of your fears were based on assumptions, not facts. Will people judge me? Maybe. But so what? Judgment is not a real danger. If I fail, will I lose everything? Based on what? He had failed before and survived. Every fear, when exposed to the light of logic, withered. A cognitive psychologist at the University of Oxford, who has been studying mental biases for 15 years, explains our primitive brain does not distinguish between real and perceived threat. It reacts in the same way. But when you consciously challenge catastrophic thinking, you activate the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain which can override the amygdala's fear response. Chapter 7. The Trial by Fire. 3 months of training. James was no longer the same person. He breathed differently. He thought differently. He acted differently. But the sensei knew that knowledge without proof is just theory. And in the Bujinkan, every student undergoes a final test before advancing. Face fear head-on without a safety net. Choose the situation that scares you the most, the sensei said, and make it happen. For James, it was clear. Public speaking, not in a small gathering, on a real stage in front of hundreds of people. The old James would have made 1,000 excuses. But this new James understood. Either he proved to himself that the transformation was real, or he would be left wondering forever. He signed up to give a talk at a law event, the topic overcoming professional fear. Ironic, weeks before the event, the old symptoms tried to return, the tightness in his chest, the catastrophic thoughts. What if I freeze? On stage? What if everyone laughs at me? But now he had tools. Breathing, questioning, gradual exposure. He rehearsed in front of the mirror, in front of friends, in the dojo, in front of students. Each time a little less. Trembling, the day of the event arrived. Backstage, heart racing, hands sweating. The body was still reacting. After all, it was a real perceived danger. Stage, lights, hundreds of judging eyes. But his mind was different. This is discomfort, he repeated to himself. It is not death. I trained for this. Breathing 4 in, 4 holding, 6 out. He stepped onto the stage. Lights were in his eyes. Silence from the audience. The moment he had feared most in his life, and he began to speak. The first few sentences came out haltingly, normal. He continued. His voice grew firmer. His hands stopped shaking. And somewhere in the middle of the lecture, something magical happened. He forgot he was afraid. He was so focused on the message that the fear just disappeared. It did not go away. It just lost relevance. 35 minutes later, applause. People came up to him afterwards to say, "Thank you. Your talk touched me. I have needed to hear this for years." James left the event transformed, not because it was perfect, but because he proved to himself, fear disappears when you stop running away. But here is what no one tells you about destroying your fears. It is not a one-time process. Fear does not disappear forever. It just stops controlling you. Chapter 8. The Eternal Warrior. 6 months after the lecture, James was still training at the dojo. Not because he still had fear that stopped him from moving, but because he understood something profound. The samurai never stopped sharpening his sword. The sensei once said, even after 1,000 battles, he keeps training. Why? Because discipline is not about reaching a certain point. It is about constantly maintaining a state of readiness. In the Bujinkan, there is a concept of Bowen, flow with the wind, do not be rigid, adapt constantly. James realized that new fears were emerging as he evolved. Fear of a serious relationship, fear of opening his own practice. Different fears, same pattern, avoiding discomfort. But now he had the system. He did not have to fight a new war every time. He used the same tools. 1. Recognize fear without judgment. 2. Breathe to calm the nervous system. 3. Question the catastrophic narrative. 4. Expose yourself gradually to discomfort. 5. Prove to yourself you survived. Each new fear was just a variation of the same enemy, and he already knew how to defeat it. Chapter 9. The truth about courage. Do you think courage is not being afraid? The sensei asked in one of James's last classes. That is not courage. It is insensitivity. Courage is feeling fear and acting. Anyway, it is seeing the danger, calculating the risk, and choosing to move forward. The coward runs away. The fool ignores it. The brave respect fear and act in spite of it. James finally understood all those times you hated yourself for being afraid. It was because you were fighting something natural. Fear is part of the human experience. It will always be there. The point was never to eliminate fear. It was choosing what to do when it appears. In the Bujinkan, ninjas face impossible missions, infiltrate castles, gather information on deadly enemies, survive in hostile territory. Were they afraid? Of course, but they trained so much that fear became just another factor in the situation, not the driver of decision-making. When you train correctly, the sensei explained, fear becomes your advantage. It keeps you alert, focused, prepared, while others freeze in fear. You use it as fuel. And here is a final secret that changes everything. The fear you avoid most is the very gateway to the strongest version of you. Chapter 10. The complete transformation. A year after joining the Bujinkan, James was literally no longer the same person. He opened his own practice, something he had put off for years for fear failure. He began a serious relationship, something he avoided for fear of vulnerability. He began giving lectures regularly, something that terrified him. Friends would say, "Man, you have completely changed. What happened?" He did not talk about the dojo, not because it was a secret, but because he knew that real transformation cannot be explained. It can only be experienced. The sensei said something in the last class that James never forgot. The Bujinkan does not teach you to fight enemies. It teaches you to dance with life. Fear, discomfort, uncertainty, they are all part of the dance. You just need to learn the steps. And the steps were simple. Not easy, but simple. Breathe when the body wants to. Panic. Question when the mind creates imaginary catastrophes. Expose yourself to what scares you in controlled doses. Prove to yourself that you are stronger than you thought. Repeat until it becomes second nature. It is not about eliminating fear. It is about redesigning your relationship with it. When you do this, when this transformation is complete, you realize something profound. You spent your entire life running away from the only opponent that could make you stronger. Fear was not your enemy. It was your teacher, and you were skipping class. The question remains, are you ready to stop running away? Because destroying your fears does not mean becoming fearless. It means becoming someone who is no longer controlled by fear, someone who feels the tightness in their chest and acts. Anyway, someone who sees the abyss and jumps because they know they have wings. The Bujinkan system is not about martial arts. It is about becoming unbreakable. From within, it is about looking at your inner demons and saying, you are not in charge here anymore. And when you do that, when that transformation happens, people will look at you and think, how does he do that? And you will know the answer because you stop fighting fear and learn to use as fuel. The fear that stops you from moving today is the door to the freedom you seek. You just need to have the courage to walk through it. If this video changed the way you see fear, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you do not miss future content. And tell me in the comments which fear will you face first. Using what you learned here, remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. If you have watched this far, thank you very much for your attention and for having the courage to face your truths. Until the next video.